Fat Karen called Judge Judy an old lady. Her savage comeback didn't just silence the courtroom. It destroyed Karen so completely that she tried to run out crying. But Judge Judy wasn't done with her yet. What happened next became the most legendary courtroom moment in television history. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why millions of people still watch this clip when they need to see real justice served. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The woman sitting across from America's toughest judge had no idea she was about to become a cautionary tale. Karen Mitchell, a 42-year-old real estate agent from suburban Phoenix, walked into that courtroom with the kind of entitlement that could only come from years of getting her way through tantrums and threats. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that signature, "Let me speak to your manager" style. Her designer purse clutched like a weapon, and her eyes held the cold confidence of someone who'd never met a person she couldn't intimidate. But she'd never met Judge Judy Files. This wasn't just any courtroom showdown. This was the day an unstoppable force of entitlement met an immovable object of justice. Judge Judy had spent decades perfecting the art of cutting through lies, exposing frauds, and delivering reality checks to people who thought they were untouchable. At 78 years old, she'd seen every type of scammer, liar, and manipulator that walked through her doors. But Karen was special. She was about to become the perfect example of what happens when entitled delusion crashes headfirst into uncompromising truth. The case seemed simple enough on paper, a dispute over a security deposit that Karen claimed was wrongfully withheld. But within minutes it would become something much more, a masterclass in how one moment of disrespect can unravel a person's entire world. Karen thought she was dealing with just another authority figure she could bulldoze. She had no idea she was about to face the most humiliating 15 minutes of her life, broadcast to millions of people who would watch her complete destruction with pure satisfaction. If you want to see entitled people get exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button and let's dive into this courtroom destruction that left Karen wishing she'd never heard the name Judge Judy. Because what you're about to witness isn't just a comeback. It's a complete obliteration that proves some people need to learn respect the hard way. The studio lights cast their familiar, harsh glow across the most famous courtroom in America, where careers were made and egos were systematically destroyed. This wasn't just a television set. It was Judge Judy's domain, a place where her word was law, and her gavel was the final verdict on human stupidity. The burgundy walls had witnessed thousands of confrontations, but today they would witness something special, the complete dismantling of a woman who thought she was above accountability. Judge Judy Files sat behind her elevated bench like a queen on her throne, her silver hair perfectly styled, her reading glasses perched with authority, and her famous scowl already forming as she reviewed the case file. After 25 years of destroying liars and frauds on national television, she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to spot entitlement from across the room. Her sharp eyes, which had made grown men confess to their crimes, were about to meet their perfect target. This was a woman who'd served as a family court judge for 25 years before becoming television royalty, who'd written multiple best-selling books, and who'd earned every ounce of the respect that was about to be so catastrophically denied. The courtroom gallery buzzed with the usual mix of curiosity seekers and daytime TV enthusiasts. But there was something electric in the air today, as if everyone sensed they were about to witness television history. The bailiff stood at attention, having learned over the years to recognize when Judge Judy was particularly loaded for bear. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keyboard, ready to capture what would become one of the most quoted exchanges in courtroom television history. Then Karen Mitchell made her entrance, and everything changed. She strutted through those doors with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences, her designer heels clicking against the floor like a countdown to disaster. At 5'6" and clearly comfortable with throwing her weight around in every sense of the phrase, Karen moved with the entitled swagger of someone who'd spent decades demanding to speak to managers and getting her way through sheer force of obnoxiousness. Her oversized Gucci knockoff sunglasses stayed perched on her head even indoors. Her acrylic nails were painted an aggressive shade of red that matched her lipstick, and her entire demeanor screamed, "I'm about to make this everyone else's problem." What made Karen particularly dangerous wasn't just her entitlement, it was her complete inability to read a room. While other litigants entered Judge Judy's courtroom with at least some recognition of where they were and who they were facing, Karen looked around like she was surveying her next conquest. She'd clearly done zero research on the woman she was about to face, had no idea about Judge Judy's reputation for verbal evisceration, and seemed genuinely convinced that her usual, tactics of intimidation and volume would work here just like they did at every Starbucks and department store she'd terrorized. The case itself was almost laughably typical of Karen's approach to life. She'd rented a luxury apartment for what she claimed was a business retreat, but had actually used for a series of loud parties that resulted in noise complaints, property damage, and ultimately her eviction. The security deposit of $2,500 had been kept by the landlord to cover cleaning fees, carpet replacement, and repairs to a bathroom mirror that had somehow been cracked during one of her gatherings. But in Karen's mind, she was the victim. The landlord was being unreasonable, the neighbors were too sensitive, and everyone else was the problem. As she took her place at the defendant's podium, Karen's body language told the entire story. She didn't stand respectfully. She posed, one hip cocked, arms crossed, with the kind of smirk that suggested she was about to school everyone in the room about how the real world worked. She'd brought a folder thick with what she considered evidence, mostly printouts of angry emails she'd sent and photos that she thought proved her innocence, but actually documented her guilt. Most telling of all, she kept glancing around the courtroom like she was waiting for someone to recognize her importance, completely oblivious to the fact that she was about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. Judge Judy's eyes never left Karen during this entire performance. Years of experience had taught her to let difficult litigants reveal themselves completely before she began her systematic destruction. She could already see the entitlement, the disrespect, the complete lack of self-awareness that would make what came next so satisfying. Karen had no idea she was being studied by a master, analyzed and cataloged like a specimen in a jar, her weaknesses identified and her inevitable downfall already scripted by her own behavior. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the audience was about to witness what happened when unstoppable arrogance met immovable justice. The moment Judge Judy asked Karen to explain her case, it became clear that this wasn't going to be an ordinary hearing. Karen didn't simply present her side. She launched into a performance that would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Her voice carried that unmistakable tone of someone who'd spent years bulldozing customer service representatives and PTA meetings, each word dripping with the kind of condescension that made people's blood boil. "Well, Your Honor," Karen began. But the way she said "Your Honor" made it sound like she was addressing a particularly slow child. "This landlord is obviously trying to scam me out of my money because he knows I'm a successful businesswoman, and he thinks he can get away with it." She gestured, dramatically with her red acrylic nails, her voice rising with each fabricated injustice. "I left that apartment in perfect condition, absolutely pristine, and now he's making up all these ridiculous charges just because I know my rights." Judge Judy's eyebrows didn't even twitch, but anyone who'd watched her show knew that stillness was the calm before the storm. She let Karen continue, watching as the woman dug her own grave with every entitled word. Karen, completely oblivious to the warning signs, interpreted the silence as permission to escalate. "And another thing," Karen continued, her voice getting louder and more aggressive, "I don't appreciate being dragged down here like some common criminal when clearly this man is just trying to—" She was cut off as Judge Judy raised a single finger, the universal signal that had silenced thousands of litigants before her. "Excuse me," Judge Judy's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that made smart people immediately apologize and shut up. But Karen wasn't smart people. Instead of backing down, Karen actually rolled her eyes, a move that sent visible shockwaves through the gallery. People exchanged glances, some covering their mouths in anticipation of what was coming. The bailiff shifted slightly, recognizing the signs of an impending Judge Judy explosion. "Did you just roll your eyes at me?" Judge Judy's voice had dropped to that dangerous register that every regular viewer knew meant someone was about to get destroyed. Karen, incredibly, doubled down. "Look, I'm just trying to explain what happened, but if you're not going to listen to me, then what's the point of being here?" She actually had the audacity to sigh dramatically, as if Judge Judy was wasting her precious time. The courtroom had gone dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her famous stare locked onto Karen like a laser beam. Years of dealing with entitled people had taught the judge to recognize the exact moment when someone crossed from merely disrespectful to completely delusional, and Karen had just sprinted across that line. "You know what, sweetheart?" Judge Judy began, and everyone in the room knew that when she called someone sweetheart in that tone, they were about to become a cautionary tale. But Karen, still completely clueless about the magnitude of trouble she was in, actually smirked. That smirk would be the last expression of confidence Karen would wear for the rest of the day. Because she had just lit the fuse on a bomb that was about to explode in her face, and Judge Judy was about to remind her exactly who she was dealing with. The buildup was complete. The stage was set. And Karen had no idea she was about to become internet famous for all the wrong reasons. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media, dissected by legal experts and turned into memes that would outlive everyone in that courtroom. Judge Judy had given Karen every opportunity to show respect, to recognize where she was and who she was dealing with. Instead, Karen chose to commit what could only be described as professional suicide on live television. "Listen here, sweetheart." Judge Judy's voice had taken on that razor-sharp edge that meant someone was about to learn a very expensive lesson. "You seem to think you're running this courtroom. Let me explain something to you about—" And that's when Karen Mitchell made the decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Instead of listening, instead of showing even a shred of respect for the woman who had built a career on destroying people exactly like her, Karen threw her hands up in exasperation and let loose with the words that would seal her fate forever. "Oh, please. Listen here, old lady, I don't have time for your little power trip." The words exploded out of her mouth like venom, each syllable dripping with contempt. "I'm a successful businesswoman, and I don't need some cranky old judge trying to lecture me about respect when you clearly don't know what you're talking about." The silence that followed was deafening, not the kind of quiet that comes from people being polite, but the stunned, horrified silence of witnesses to a catastrophic mistake. It was as if someone had just walked into a church and started screaming obscenities, or slapped a police officer during a traffic stop. The gallery sat frozen, mouths literally hanging open, unable to process what they'd just heard. Judge Judy's face went through a transformation that was almost supernatural. The professional composure she'd maintained for decades melted away, replaced by something far more dangerous, the cold fury of a woman who had earned every ounce of respect Karen had just so casually dismissed. Her eyes narrowed to laser points, her jaw tightened, and for a moment that felt like an eternity. She simply stared at Karen with the kind of look that should have made the woman spontaneously combust. Karen, incredibly, seemed to think she'd just delivered some kind of victory speech. She actually nodded to herself as if satisfied with her performance, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd just committed career suicide on national television. She had no idea that millions of viewers were watching her destroy herself, that this moment would be shared and reshared until it became legendary, that she just handed Judge Judy the ammunition to obliterate her so completely that she'd become a cautionary tale. The courtroom held its collective breath. The camera zoomed in on Judge Judy's face, capturing the exact moment when America's toughest judge decided that Karen Mitchell was about to learn the hardest lesson of her entitled life. The fuse had been lit, the bomb was about to explode, and Karen had no idea she was standing at ground zero of her own destruction. The transformation in Judge Judy's demeanor was like watching a master swordsman draw their blade. Her voice dropped to that deadly whisper that had made hardened criminals confess their sins. And when she spoke, every word was chosen with surgical precision to inflict maximum damage. "Old lady?" Judge Judy repeated the words slowly, savoring them like a fine wine, her eyes never leaving Karen's face. "Old lady?" Her voice rose just enough to make Karen flinch. And that's when America's most feared judge began the systematic destruction that would become legendary. "Let me tell you something about this old lady. You pathetic excuse for a human being." Judge Judy's words cut through the air like razor blades. "This old lady has been practicing law longer than you've been alive. This old lady was breaking down liars and frauds like you when you were still wetting your bed. This old lady has forgotten more about respect, intelligence, and basic human decency than you will ever learn in your miserable, entitled little life." Karen's smug expression began to crack like ice in the sun. The confidence that had carried her through the first part of the hearing was evaporating, as she realized she wasn't dealing with some pushover authority figure she could intimidate. She was facing a woman who had built an empire on destroying people exactly like her, and she had just handed Judge Judy every weapon needed for her own annihilation. "You want to talk about being a successful businesswoman?" Judge Judy continued, her voice gaining momentum like a freight train. "This old lady has built a career worth hundreds of millions of dollars by exposing fraudulent, lying, disrespectful pieces of garbage like you. This old lady has written best-selling books, changed the legal system, and earned the respect of millions of people while you've been bullying teenagers at Starbucks and screaming at retail workers." The gallery was losing their minds. People were literally covering their mouths to keep from cheering out loud. Some were recording on their phones despite the no recording policy, and everyone was witnessing the kind of verbal destruction that would be talked about for decades. Karen's face had gone from entitled smug to horrified realization as each word hit her like physical blows. But Judge Judy was just getting started. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into Karen's soul, and delivered the knockout punch that would become the most quoted comeback in television history. "You know what the difference is between you and this old lady, sweetheart? This old lady earned her respect through decades of hard work, intelligence, and integrity. You demand respect while contributing absolutely nothing to society, except noise, complaints, and the kind of toxic entitlement that makes decent people cross the street to avoid you. This old lady has helped thousands of people find justice. You can't even manage to take responsibility for trashing an apartment like the overgrown toddler you are. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For the first time in probably decades, she was completely speechless. The woman who had spent her entire adult life talking over people, demanding managers, and bulldozing her way through every situation had finally met someone who could not only match her energy but completely obliterate her with pure facts and devastating truth. And let me tell you something else about this old lady, Judge Judy continued, sensing Karen's complete defeat and deciding to twist the knife. This old lady is about to cost you $2,500 plus court costs, because not only are you losing this case, you're paying every penny your landlord is asking for. Why? Because this old lady can smell a liar from across the room, and you, sweetheart, reek of dishonesty and entitlement. The courtroom erupted. People were clapping, laughing, and cheering as Karen stood there completely destroyed, her face red with humiliation, and her entitled world crashing down around her. She had called Judge Judy an old lady, and that old lady had just ended her entire existence on live television. If you're loving this courtroom justice, smash that like button, because Judge Judy is just getting started destroying this entitled Karen who thought she could disrespect a legend. What followed Judge Judy's epic destruction was a masterclass in what complete defeat looks like on a human face. Karen Mitchell stood at that podium like a deflated balloon, all the air sucked out of her entitled existence by a woman who had just reminded her exactly how small she really was. The smirk was gone, replaced by a horrified expression as the full weight of her humiliation settled in. She tried to speak, opening her mouth several times, but no words came out. Just the pathetic sounds of someone whose entire worldview had just been shattered on national television. I didn't mean. Karen finally managed to stammer, her voice barely above a whisper, all traces of her earlier arrogance completely evaporated. But Judge Judy wasn't interested in her backpedaling. Oh, but you did mean it, Judge Judy cut her off with surgical precision. You meant every disrespectful word that came out of your mouth, and now you're going to live with the consequences. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,500 plus court costs. Case dismissed. Get out of my courtroom. The gavel came down like thunder, sealing Karen's fate with a finality that echoed through the studio. The gallery erupted in sustained applause, people literally standing up to cheer for Judge Judy's demolition job. The bailiff was trying to maintain professional composure, but even he couldn't hide the satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. This was the kind of justice that restored people's faith in the system. Karen's exit was perhaps the most humiliating part of the entire ordeal. She gathered her papers with shaking hands, her designer bag clutched against her chest like a shield, her face burning with embarrassment as the crowd continued to celebrate her destruction. She couldn't meet anyone's eyes as she shuffled toward the exit. The same heels that had clicked with confident arrogance now barely making a sound as she tried to disappear. But the most devastating moment came when she reached the courtroom doors and turned back for one last look, perhaps hoping for some sign that this nightmare wasn't real. Instead, she found Judge Judy still staring at her with that unmistakable look of complete disdain, and the gallery still buzzing with excitement over what they'd just witnessed. Within hours, clips of the exchange were trending across every social media platform. Old Lady became a rallying cry for respecting elders and experience. Karen's destruction was shared millions of times, turned into memes, and analyzed by legal experts who called it one of the most satisfying moments in television history. The woman who had strutted into that courtroom thinking she could intimidate America's toughest judge had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of entitled behavior. Karen Mitchell had wanted to be remembered. She just never imagined it would be as the woman who called Judge Judy an old lady and got completely obliterated for it. Justice had been served, and it tasted absolutely perfect. The Karen Mitchell courtroom destruction became more than just viral entertainment. It became a cultural moment that perfectly captured why respect isn't something you demand, but something you earn. In a world where entitled behavior seems to be rewarded and amplified, Judge Judy's savage takedown reminded millions of people that actions still have consequences, and disrespect still comes with a price. What made this moment so powerful wasn't just the spectacular nature of Karen's downfall, but what it represented about the clash between earned authority and manufactured entitlement. Judge Judy didn't become America's most respected television judge by accident. She built her reputation through decades of hard work, legal expertise, and an unwavering commitment to truth and justice. She earned the right to sit behind that bench, earned the respect of millions of viewers, and most importantly, earned the authority to destroy people who thought they could disrespect her with impunity. Karen, on the other hand, represented everything wrong with modern entitlement culture. She walked into that courtroom assuming her usual tactics of intimidation and volume would work, that she could bulldoze yet another authority figure into giving her what she wanted. She had no respect for experience, no appreciation for earned wisdom, and no understanding that some people simply cannot be intimidated. Her downfall was inevitable from the moment she decided that her manufactured importance was more valuable than Judge Judy's decades of earned respect. The lesson here extends far beyond a single courtroom encounter. In every workplace, every community, and every interaction, there are people who have earned their positions through hard work, dedication, and proven competence. They deserve respect not because of their titles, but because of what they've accomplished to earn those titles. When we dismiss experience as irrelevant, when we treat wisdom as weakness, when we confuse our own loudness with actual authority, we set ourselves up for the kind of humiliating reality check that Karen received. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire story is that justice was served not through violence or cruelty, but through pure, undeniable truth. Judge Judy didn't destroy Karen with lies or personal attacks. She destroyed her with facts, with earned authority, and with the kind of verbal precision that only comes from decades of dealing with people who think they're above accountability. Karen's humiliation was entirely self-inflicted, the natural consequence of her own disrespectful behavior meeting someone who simply wouldn't tolerate it. This moment reminds us that in a world full of Karens demanding to speak to managers and trying to intimidate their way through life, there are still Judge Judys out there, people who have earned the right to push back, who refuse to be bullied, and who will serve justice with a smile. The old lady that Karen tried to dismiss turned out to be the most powerful woman she'd ever faced. And the lesson she learned that day is one that millions of people got to enjoy watching. If you want to see more entitled people get the reality checks they deserve, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below about the most disrespectful Karen you've ever encountered. And don't forget to smash that like button if Judge Judy's legendary comeback made your day. Because in a world that sometimes feels like it rewards bad behavior, moments like this remind us that real justice still exists. And sometimes it comes from the most unexpected old ladies who refuse to take anyone's nonsense.